Welcome to Catholic Discovery 101. Our program is dedicated to sharing the Catholic faith that we love with our friends and neighbors in the Pocatello-Chubbuck community. My name is Liz Johnson. I'm a parishioner with Holy Spirit Catholic Community. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the extraordinary Jubilee Year of Mercy that Pope Francis has established for us. And again, our guest is our friend Thomas Smith, who is an excellent Catholic theologian, biblical scholar, and a Catholic speaker who is in much demand around the world. Thomas, thank you for being with us again. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Year of Mercy. Last month we talked about the historical perspective and briefly discussed the vision that's being handed to us by Pope Francis. Today we're going to learn a little bit more about how we as lay people, as Christians, can be involved in this extraordinary Jubilee Year of Mercy and what we can expect from our church and from our priests during this year. So Thomas, let's start with the document that came out of the Vatican. It's called a Bull of Indiction. What is that?
That's a great question because it's part of that Vatican vocabulary that seems so foreign to us. And even the terminology bull of indiction just sounds severe in itself. Mm-hmm. But what happened over time is, if you've ever seen older movies of how a letter would be written and signed and then sealed with a wax, mm-hmm. hot wax would be poured on the letter, and then they'd take something like this, a seal, and they'd place that into the wax to make the letter confidential and so on. Well, you can imagine traveling with a letter like that. That wax can get broken or messed up in some kind of way or damaged or melt. Yep, that's right, if you got to go a long way in hot weather. So they'd had a little metal kind of cover like a bubble. That's what bulla means, is a round object or a bull, and they could stick that over that wax seal to protect it and secure the material inside of that. So the object on the front of these letters from the Holy Father ended up becoming the name of the document, so it's called a bull, which means it's a special document from the Holy Father. And indiction just indicates that it's about a specific period of time, or it's indicating a certain theme that we need to pay attention to. So that's where the terminology bull of indiction comes from. And the name of it is Misericordiae Vultus, which is Latin for the face of the Father, the face of mercy. So every document is titled by the first Latin words used in that document. That becomes the title. The
title of it, okay. So mercy is Pope Francis's vision for the church. How can we as lay people participate in this special year of mercy?
One of the wonderful things about Pope Francis is he's such a practical pastor. So he gives us very tangible things. And I'm assuming, or I'm certain, he's going to give us more as the year unfolds for the church. And we're already seeing this in many different challenges. For example, opening our homes to refugees if we're living where those refugees are coming. But I've just identified some that I drew out of the document. Some of them are kind of practical things we do in our interior spiritual life, and then some of them are, tangible things, really is what he's wanting in our life. So the first is that we would become students of mercy, that we'd let, as he's in his language, in order to be capable of mercy, we must first dispose ourselves to listen to the Word of God. So one of the things I would challenge people to do is during this year of mercy, get a concordance, which is a way you can look up specific words in the Bible, and look up all the references to mercy throughout Scripture. Become a student of that. That disposes us to see that mercy is one of those constant themes that goes from Genesis to Revelation. He quotes the wonderful document from John Paul II, St. John Paul II, Rich in Mercy, which is a comprehensive biblical treatise on how we look at the idea of mercy as Catholics. So you might want to pick that up and study that during the Year of Mercy. Maybe take a selection every day from that wonderful document. One of the other big challenges is for us to learn again, for many of us Catholics for the first time, the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. So these are 14 spiritual works of mercy, and corporal works of mercy, so 7 of each, that are concrete, tangible ways for us to live those out. And we call them corporal because it is directed to the human body. Our body is corporal. Spiritual, that is directed to the soul of the human person. And I think most of us know those corporal works of mercy: to give drink to the thirsty, food to the hungry, clothing, shelter, and so on. Visit the prisoner, visit the sick, and to bury the dead. Those are corporal works. The spiritual works are things like counsel people who are doubting, instruct people who are uneducated, admonish the sinner, forgive others who've wounded us, those kind of things. Pray for the living and the dead. So he's saying, learn those again. Those used to be things that older kind of Baltimore Catechism Catholics, you can dust off your brain a little bit and remember those. And I challenge us in particular to use those as examinations of conscience before we go to confession. Because as we talked about in last month's session, it's ultimately the measure by which our life will be judged before Christ is how did we love, how did we show mercy. So I can ask myself, how am I directly participating in these 14 works of mercy? And if I can't participate directly, how can I support, either financially or through my prayers, those kind of ministries? So for example, you're involved in prison ministry, and that's been a great passion that the Lord has put on your heart. Not everyone's going to go up to the prison, but they can support your ministry financially or through their prayers, what you're doing. So refamiliarize ourselves with those, and maybe even take those 14 and focus over the 12 months of the Jubilee year. Pick one of those to really focus on how is my parish living that out? What is the ministry in my parish that's directed to that, like the prison ministry? How can I support them, either by direct involvement, almsgiving, or my prayers? And it's a wonderful thing to do as a family. Just look at what are the ministries, and as we teach our kids about mercy, what are the ministries in our parish that are living these out? So that's a very kind of practical one. In fact, it's the one time in the document he says, it's my burning desire that we reflect upon these works of mercy as a way to reawaken our conscience.
So we talked briefly last time about how the corporal works of mercy, we didn't call them that at the time, but those come directly from Luke's gospel.
Yeah, they come directly from, even from the Old Testament. So they go all the way back to Genesis.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about those spiritual? Is that from Luke's gospel too? Or?
Yeah, so we see the corporal works of mercy primarily in Matthew's gospel spelled out, but you'll see them a little bit in the Sermon on the Plain in Luke's gospel as well, Luke chapter 11. But the spiritual works of mercy are found throughout the scriptures as well, throughout the New Testament. So Jesus doesn't say in a list, here are the works of mercy. But the church, as she's discerned mercy over time, kind of pluck these out, and 7 is obviously an important number for us biblically and as a church sacramentally, that they just developed over time, that the church says these are the things. So like teachers do this a lot, educate those who are ignorant. Catechists are doing that. But it's also, bearing hatreds against us and letting go of unforgiveness in our own heart. So it really is speaking interiorly to how to grow in mercy in our own soul, and how the works of mercy can be spiritual as well in our life. Poverty is much bigger than just material poverty. There's a poverty of knowledge in the church of what our faith means, and so the spiritual works of mercy address that as well.
Okay. So what else could we do as lay people?
Yeah, one of the other big things for him is to intensify our participation in the sacrament of reconciliation. So there's going to be special times during the year of mercy to participate in that sacrament. There's hopefully parishes are going to have initiatives that say, hey, come home, come back again, we want to receive you. And he wants our clergy, in particular our priests in the confessional, to see their role as that merciful Father again, to really make that experience meaningful and profound and welcoming to those who are coming back to the faith. Maybe it's 10, 20, 30 years that they're coming back. So doing that, and then participating in as ourselves. What within me is resisting being merciful to others? Am I still harboring unforgiveness for someone because I'm waiting for them to come and say they're sorry? Don't wait. Unforgiveness is like drinking the poison we intend for the people we can't forgive. It kills us interiorly. And it really closes our hearts off to continue to grow in grace as human persons. So there's that invitation and reconciliation, not only to frequent the sacrament, but in all honesty, I've got a member of my family. That's the big thing I'm still dealing with. And the extraordinary call for me in my personal life is this is a year I need to deal with that. So that's another very practical way he's given us to do it. Pilgrimage is going to be another big part of the year, and what he wants to emphasize there is that the journey of the Christian life is a journey towards an end, a goal, and that goal is mercy. So he's established doors of mercy in Rome at each of the 4 major basilicas, and the opening of these doors is a concrete symbol of the church opening herself up to others. And my challenge is for Catholic families, appoint a door of mercy in your house. And maybe it's your front door. Maybe put something on that door that this year, this is going to be a door of mercy. And ask the Lord, help me to look around in my parish and say, where's the widow or the widower or the immigrant college student that's here that would love to have a family meal? Or where's someone on the fringes or the edges that we can invite through our door of mercy this year? So that opening of doors, I think, is a profound image, not only for physical doors, but the door of our heart. Lord, give me the grace to open my heart more fully to those you're going to put in my path.
Okay.
So the doors of mercy are great, and we're going to get one certainly in every diocese. So every diocese will have a pilgrimage point, and most of our parishes might have a special way to do that. And lastly, just embrace that idea of the adventure of mercy. He says during this year, God is going to be a God of surprises. So begin every day to say, Lord, give me the eyes of mercy to see the needs around me and to respond with generosity, mercy, and love. In Judaism, this is called the Ein Tovah, and Ein Tovah means a merciful eye. You may remember in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, the person whose eye is filled with light, or a good eye, a person who has a good eye, his life is filled with light. A person who has a bad eye, his life is filled with darkness. So what in the world does that mean? Well, a good eye in Judaism is the Ein Tovah. And in the Old Testament, that's the eye that not only sees the needs of those around them, but they respond with mercy and generosity and love. So many of us either are oblivious to the needs for mercy around us. We walk through the world with blinders, or we see a need and we don't respond with generosity, mercy, and love. I was in a car with someone who picked me up from the airport once, and we saw a man begging for alms on the side of the road, and she was going to get something to give to him, and then she looked down and saw his shoes and said, look, he's wearing brand new shoes, and she withdrew her money. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a terrible litmus test, because maybe the car just before us gave him some shoes. So sometimes we set a lot of parameters, like this person has to qualify for all these things before I'll show mercy. And so really to look for those moments of mercy. I had a couple years ago coming across what are those rocky moonscape that we have here in Idaho?
Craters of the Moon.
Craters of the Moon. I'm coming across that. I'm bringing my dog back from the vet. I've got her stretched out in the back seat. And I see a guy traveling down that desolate road on a bike, pulling a wagon of his possessions behind him, and he had 2 dogs lashed to the back of that. And it was just blistering heat. And I couldn't put him in my car, but something inside of me said, you need to stop and do something. And I resisted that. And I thought, you know what? This is my situation. I've got a place I need to be. Someone else is going to need to show him mercy. And I missed a mercy moment. Well, 2 days later, I'm at McDonald's here in Pocatello, out in Chubbuck. I come out of McDonald's, and who's there a few days later? That guy.
With his dogs?
With his dogs. And I thought, oh my Lord. I went up to him and I said, you know what? Were you going across Craters of the Moon a few days ago? He said, yeah, it was terrible. And I said, I saw you, and something told me to stop, and I didn't stop, and I'm so sorry I didn't. His name was Tim. And I look at that and I say, thank you, Lord, for giving me another opportunity to show mercy to Tim. And what's so amazing is my mom, who was with me, a few days later, she's getting gas near Lava Hot Springs, comes out, and guess who's next to her gas pump? That same guy. So now I'm thinking, maybe this wasn't a human being. Maybe Timothy was an angel, because Hebrews says, sometimes God sends us angels to see if we'll show hospitality and love. Yep. And so we want to not only see a need, but hear that interior voice within us. Show mercy. You may not know how it's going to play out, but just stop. But let yourself be used by the Lord. And maybe your mercy is just a kind word or a smile, or just, hey, I recognize you're in need, or maybe you have a bottle of water you can hand off. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you bet.
So what can we expect from the church and from our clergy during this Jubilee year?
Well, hopefully they're going to pick up this extraordinary year and really see that as an opportunity for our parishes to reach out. I'm hoping we're going to see parishes canvass neighborhoods and just go out and maybe invite people to special potlucks or events. The church very formally, after opening the Jubilee doors on December 8th, is going to have, I think, up to 16 different themes throughout the year they've already identified, and we're probably going to get more, that are themed around different segments of the church. So a day of mercy for catechists, or a day of mercy for educators, or for those whose particular ministry is to meet the needs where the rubber hits the road, missionary communities, young people. The World Youth Day is certainly going to have that theme, and it's going to be in Krakow, Poland. So it's going to be very near where the Divine Mercy and John Paul II is from originally. But as Pope Francis said, God is a God of surprises. So we're going to see, I think, extraordinary things. We've already seen it with trying to streamline annulment processes for the church. So, in some countries that can take up to a decade. We've done a pretty good job in the United States of streamlining the process. But how do we make that very painful encounter a moment of mercy for people and remove unnecessary obstacles within it? Or extending to our clergy the ability to forgive things like abortion, the painful experience of abortion, so that message of mercy can meet people very directly. And in the United States, that can be 1 in 4 women that have had that experience. And how does the church really embrace and love and bathe those women in God's mercy? And also, the Pope is going to be sending out what are called missionaries of mercy, and they're going to be given special graces and sent throughout the world to open their arms in new and really beautiful ways to mercy. There's some sins of excommunication that are reserved to the Pope to forgive. Well, these missionaries of mercy are going to be granted that mandate during the year of mercy to really go out and again, welcome people back to the body, to represent the arms of the church saying, come home.
Come home.
Yeah.
That's, I'm a cradle Catholic, but something I didn't realize, that the sin of abortion could only be forgiven by a bishop. I didn't realize that they're already so shattered and so wounded by what they've had to do when they come back for mercy, that there's a wall, a roadblock put up.
Yeah, and this is going to open a new place, for people to come, more places for people to come and experience God's love and forgiveness for them. And that's beautiful. And there's wonderful ministries like the Rachel ministry that ministers to those women that have undergone that, and men. There's always whole families involved in that process, and the church, while recognizing the severity of abortion, is saying we want Christ's healing power to speak into that. And what a beautiful thing when you see that healing come, and then that woman can turn around and bless others and help them continue that journey. Exactly.
Yeah. So. On December 8th, which is the feast day for the Immaculate Conception, the Holy Door in the Vatican is going to be opened. What's the Holy Door, and how? And it's transformed into the Door of Mercy?
Yes, it's a door that normally is opened at the beginning of a Jubilee year, because traditionally, you remember from the Middle Ages, Jubilee years were times of pilgrimage and penance and coming back to the mercy of the Lord. And so if you go to St. Peter's today, the door furthest on your right, entering into St. Peter's, is sealed off right now. That was opened during the Jubilee year of 2000, and I was very graced as a young man to be present when St. John Paul II opened that door of mercy. Even in 2000, he was already pretty bent and broken physically to get through that door. And so, again, that's a great symbol that's being opened up as a sign of the church saying, come home. There's the merciful Father again that's welcoming the prodigal, and the church's mother opening her arms in a special way. So passing through these doors of mercy is just, again, it's hearing that invitation interiorly for ourselves and asking ourselves as a people, how can we open our hearts? How can we open our homes? How can we open our parishes? And hopefully those doors stay open in a real sense for us throughout our life.
Well, and I don't want people to come away thinking that it's only during this Jubilee year of mercy that the church is that way. Pope Francis is doing some pretty spectacular things at the Vatican right now to help embrace that before any of this even started. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for us?
You're right. I mean, all of us have seen the amazing footage of Pope Francis jumping off his Pope Mobile and embracing people with different disabilities or kinds of physical brokenness. But he's doing even more. One of the beautiful things is when he appointed his almoner, and the almoner is the person in charge of almsgiving for the Bishop of Rome. He told the almoner, he's a Polish bishop now, he said, throw away the desk that's in your office because you're never going to be there. I don't want you sitting behind a desk dispensing charity. I want you out in the streets of my diocese, because Rome is really his diocese. And I want you to talk to homeless people. I want you to share a meal with them, ask them how we best can serve them. And what came out of that encounter of the almoner with the homeless around Rome is they said, there's many places for us to find food and shelter. What we don't have is a place to shower and get cleaned up and get a haircut and get a shave. So Pope Francis, hearing that, worked with his almoner to set up in Bernini's colonnades, and those are that's the colonnade that goes around the piazza, which is an architectural symbol of the arms of Mother Church reaching out to her children. Set up bathrooms there and showers, and so a place for homeless people to come clean up. And then all of these barbers and hairstylists are coming there to offer their services for free to cut their hair. There's all these wonderful stories about how their lives are being transformed meeting these people. There was a homeless man who'd been homeless for 20 plus years in Rome, and it actually was saw his role to evangelize pilgrims coming to Rome, and he lived on the streets with the poor. When he died, he was buried in Vatican City. It was another beautiful sign by our Holy Father to welcome him into the bosom of Mother Church. And he's asked 10 churches around St. Peter's to do the same thing, to provide these facilities. So he's really challenging us, as you say, because we're in a time where mercy can be lost, and we need to have that constant reminder that it is the beating heart of the gospel, it's called in the document. We need to constantly be brought back to our core again, back to the basics. Just like spring training, you have professional ball players who have to come back and go through the basics again. Go back to the basics. We all need that. He really wants us to recover that original joy, simplicity, boldness, passion, and compassion that marked the first followers of Jesus. And to see that joy renewed and that merciful outlook renewed in every generation. So, we're going to be, if we're open to the grace of this year, we're going to be transformed in a way that we're going to carry this through the rest of our life.
Okay. So let's go back to 2000 and St. John Paul II. He issued a challenge to governments. Tell us about that. Yeah,
this is one of the exciting moments when you see the church as a kind of conscience for the whole world. So St. John Paul II gave an address about the stifling and suffocating power of debt, or what it was doing to poor nations, especially at that time, poor African nations. In some of the nations, the debt load was the equivalent of $400 for every citizen of that country. Now, it's probably something similar to that in the United States, but the difference is their annual incomes as individuals was less than $400. So these countries were so crippled by debt, they couldn't move forward. They were trapped in this cycle of debt. And that's really what the Jubilee was about in the Old Testament. It was making sure that this cycle of debt couldn't be perpetuated. So every 7 years, you had to release people from debts, and you restored them their ancestral lands so they could start providing for themselves again. Well, the world remarkably took up this challenge of Pope John Paul II to forgive debt. In the United States, we had Jubilee legislation in our Congress, which is pretty amazing. And then the G7 nations got together and identified $50 billion in debt that they would forgive during the Jubilee year in response to the challenge of St. John Paul II. So I really expect the church will issue a similar challenge to the world today, and even to individual churches. How can we give till it hurts a little bit during this Jubilee year, and look at ways we can forgive debt, and even down to the micro level in our life. You know, does somebody owe me a little money? Maybe this is the year I say, you know, don't worry about that anymore. And you can never outgive the Lord, as that scripture in Luke says. God gives, when we give, He gives back, pressed down and shaken together and flowing over back to us. So His mercy is unquenchable in our life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. It's, you know, last time we talked about the lights of mercy in the 20th century, and you talked about Faustina and the Divine Mercy message. You just talked about St. John Paul II and his message. You touched a little bit on Mother Teresa and how her life is an image for us. She might be canonized this year during the Year of Mercy. Is that correct?
Exactly. So she's a blessed right now. Mm-hmm. And Pope Francis had expressed that it would really be his great desire to see her canonized. How appropriate during this Year of Mercy, mm-hmm. as appropriate as St. John Paul II dying on the Vigil of Divine Mercy. And we've just heard now that the second miracle, which is a man who was healed of multiple abscesses or tumors on his brain miraculously, is very likely going to be the second miracle. The priest that worked with her, worked with him, asked that family to pray specifically to Mother Teresa of Calcutta. So it'll be beautiful, because she not only concretely lived out mercy in her life, but one of the other powerful things she went through spiritually is she went through what's called a dark night of the soul, where she had no consolations in prayer for nearly 5 decades. And she underwent that deliberately and willingly to identify with those who feel forgotten by God. And so she said, if I'm going to be a saint, I'll be the saint of darkness. That is, if you ever feel forgotten or abandoned, if your heart cry is the one of Jesus from the cross, Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? I'm the saint for you. I'll be the saint for you. So I think that really speaks into this Year of Mercy too, that we're extending forgiveness and we're extending hope to people that feel either forgotten by the church or forgotten by the Lord, that we're reminding them that the Lord knows and the Lord is present to you.
She is the perfect saint,
yes,
for that, given what she went through in her life and still continued to do God's work and what He wanted. So yes. In this Jubilee Year of Mercy is great. At the bottom of the screen, you should see the address, a website address for Thomas Smith. There is also a website address for the Vatican for this Jubilee Year of Mercy. You can check there, you'll get updates, you'll see everything. Unfortunately, our time is at an end today. Thank you for joining us. Please come back and visit us again. Thank you.
We slide